a shout out to our friends at Beatles where they stream live Beatles music 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's Beatles for all of your Beatles music needs.
It's the Beatles from the beginning to the end. It's their solo careers. It's their humor. It's their incredible music. It's the British invasion. It's their American adversaries. It's an historical musical education. It's the Beatles and a whole lot more. A Beatles fan's paradise. It's BeatlesArama.com. Tune in. You'll love it.
Welcome to Tomorrow Never Knows with me, Bob Wilson, our Lord Mayor of Art, Sir Warren Brown, and author Phil Weathers. He's got a new book coming out soon, but we'll mention that at the end of the show. We give a big shout out to Beatles-orama. That's all right, Mama. Beatles-orama. That's all right for you. Free Beatles music, 8 days a week, 24 hours a day. That's Beatles-orama. You can find it on the web. Check out our new Facebook page, Beatles Station. It's pretty good. And today, our extra special, legendary guest host, we're honored to have Mr. Ivor Davis, and he will be interviewing the legendary Joie Gould Gati. And just a little introduction for her. London-born writer and former teenage model Joie Gould Gati moved to the USA in 1962 when she was just 19, and immediately she enchanted Hollywood. She landed jobs working as a personal assistant for some of the movie capital's most celebrated stars, singer Rosemary Clooney and her husband, actor Jose Ferrer. Rosemary's brother, of course, was Nick Clooney, who, as the world knows, was the father of an actor who went on to do rather well in Hollywood. I speak of George Clooney. She rubbed shoulders with famous faces who often came to dinner at the Clooney household, including Bing Crosby, Marlene Dietrich, and the brilliant actor-comedian Danny Kaye. Other assignments followed. She worked as a personal assistant to Oscar-winning producer Harold Mirisch, West Side Story, and The Apartment. Those were great films. During that time, she met and became friends with other legends, director Billy Wilder, Dean Martin, and a British chap we all know named Peter Sellers. All right, so we welcome to the show now our friend Ivor Davis and Joie Gould Gati. Ivor, could you please tell us a little, you've been on the show so many times, we know you so well and everybody loves you. Could you please tell us a little bit about our excellent guest whom you've brought on and we're so happy to have here tonight?
Well, let me just say that Joie has a very celebrated career. And in a way, I probably should keep the ingredients of a brilliant career secret until we get to it. So I want to make sure that everybody keeps tuning in, because you are in for a feast of wonderful anecdotes by someone who was actually there, who was an eyewitness to what took place, and will entertain and entrance us with what she has to say. So rather than give her the sort of 3-hour and 10-minute intro that she deserves, I'd like to get going. And Joie, let's kick it off with this way. You started out life as a young model. And before we get to the rock and roll element of your life, let's go back to your modeling days in England in the 60s. It was an incredible, dazzling, swinging 60s. So please tell us about how you got into the modeling business, what it was like, and why you changed direction.
Well, actually, I started modeling before the swinging 60s. I started modeling in like the late 50s, early 60s. So it wasn't quite swinging yet. I was just 16. And I was working as a temporary secretary at Granada Television in London. And one of the casting ladies came up to me and said that she thought that I should make commercials, because commercial television had just kind of exploded at that time in London. And I didn't know what she was talking about, actually. I mean, I had no idea how to do that. But I was trying to save up money to come to America. And I thought, well, if I could do some commercials, I could make a bit of money. So I looked up in the phone directory and found this charm school. It was called Gordon Eden Ween Charm School in this grotty old alleyway off of Leicester Square. And it wasn't charming at all. but he was also an agent, and he said once you graduate from his school after all these courses, he puts you on his books, and that's how I started doing modeling from there.
You got off to an intriguing start to your modeling career, but then why were you so keen to leave London and head off to Hollywood at such a tender age?
Well, I had always, for some reason, since I was a little girl, since I was about 8, always wanted to go to America. There was something intriguing about it for me. It was very gloomy and grey in London after the war, and I was always looking for excitement and adventure, and so I had started my plans to go to America when I was very young. And so as soon as I was old enough and had enough money, which was when I was 18 actually, I left to go. So it was something that I'd always thought all my life, really.
Yes, but even so, I grew up in London about the same time as you did, Joey. And the idea of, I hate to use the term abandoning your family, but leaving London where you grew up to go to Hollywood where you presumably didn't know many people, that was quite an adventurous thing to do, wasn't it?
Well, I didn't think so. Actually, I wasn't coming to Hollywood initially. I wanted to go to New York. I wanted to work in advertising. So my aim actually was to come to America to work on Madison Avenue, work and make commercials. Produce them. I didn't want to be in them anymore. I'd rather like the idea of producing them. But it was by accident that I came to California with a girlfriend. She was coming over. She was leaving New York to go to California. And it was very, when you're 18, you make choices on the spur of the moment. And it was very cold in New York, and she was going to California, and I knew it was warm there. So I said, I'll come to California with you for a few months. And we just took the Greyhound bus, and we just traveled across country. Nothing seemed that difficult at the time for me. I wasn't scared of anything. I didn't know a soul in America at all when I first came here, but that didn't bother me either. I just knew I thought I'd meet people. Nothing really was. I wasn't frightened of anything. I was quite fearless, actually. I think I was a bit stupid, but because I always thought it's all going to be all right all the time. I was very confident.
Well, you are obviously still fearless, but I can tell you that this is what a jump that was. And I must ask you, did your parents think you were crazy, or did they encourage you to leave home?
Oh, no, they didn't encourage me at all. But, they'd heard me speaking about this since I was a little girl. So my mother didn't want me to go, but my father was my ally, and he kind of convinced, because they had to sign all my papers at the American Embassy because I was too young to sign off on everything. So they had to sign all my immigration papers. So I immigrated here. I got a green card straight away. And so they had to come and sign everything. So I was under 21. And my mother, of course, she didn't want me to come, but my father convinced her that it was in my dream, and he didn't feel that she should be able to stop me. And I left school at 15, and I worked. I had like 3 jobs, and I went to night school. So I was a very sort of self-sufficient person. So they trusted that I'd be all right because I really was quite very self-sufficient and been taking care of myself since I was 15. So they encouraged, they supported me. They didn't encourage me. They supported me.
Yeah. So the teenager Joey shows up in Southern California. You didn't know anybody, and yet how did you survive? Did you come with a lot of money, or did you come with a limited budget? And then how did you manage to stay afloat?
Well, I saved all my money, from my modeling, and I've been saving for years. Anyway, so I had enough money to last me for about a month. So I was with my girlfriend, and we got an apartment on La Brea and Orange, sort of between. It was in this very strange neighborhood. We didn't know where we were. We had no idea where we were. So we got an apartment, and we had to put down lots of deposits because we didn't have any credit. So every time we had the gas put on, we had to leave them a deposit, and the electric. Anyway, so the money was going very fast. And so I said, look, I'm going to look for a job. I want to stay here for a few months, and so I need to get a job. So I just started looking for a job.
And did you find a job, and if so, who with?
No, I didn't find a job for a long time because the employment agencies, because I was young, I told them I was only 18, which I was, and I had no local experience. So they said they couldn't send me on a job because I wasn't very reliable. That I was going to, keep the job, I suppose. I didn't, whatever. They wouldn't help me. So I used to just walk around. I used to walk to Beverly Hills and just walk into people's offices and ask if they needed a secretary because I could do shorthand and typing. And I started getting to know people. And then what happened was this one thing started the whole thing going was before I left London, my sister got married. And she had this really big wedding, and we were all at this hairdresser getting our hair done for the reception. And my sister was telling everyone, oh, my sister's leaving in a few weeks. She's going to America and blah, blah, blah. So this hairdresser came up to me and said, oh, I worked in Los Angeles for a big beauty shop there. And if you ever go to Los Angeles, you must meet my friends. And so one day when I was walking around Los Angeles, I had remembered the piece of paper he gave me, and I walked into this beauty shop, and it was owned by Perth Westmore, who is the Westmore family, which was the big makeup, and every brother worked at every major studio, and Perth was the head makeup man at Warner Brothers for many, many years, and now he had opened up his own beauty shop on Sunset Boulevard. And I walked in, and even though I wasn't a friend of this man, so I felt a bit wrong saying this, but I said, look, I'm a friend of Ashley's, and he asked me to say hello, and he gave me a whole list of names. And they were all so excited because apparently they all loved this man so much. And then they took me up to meet Perth, and Perth kind of fell in love with me because his mother was English, and his parents came from Yorkshire. And so he wanted me to work. That's how I got my first job. He wanted me to work for him. So he gave me a job. I told him I wasn't a hairdresser and I wasn't a makeup artist. He said he'd train me, but I wasn't really that interested to do either of those jobs. So he gave me a job as a receptionist there. And that's when I started meeting all these sort of people. Everybody was so kind. And I think as soon as I was this young English girl, I was quite a novelty to everybody. There weren't that many English people here at that time. So I think everybody thought I was quite a novelty.
The Westmore name, of course, was legend in Hollywood. And it seems like, from what you're saying, that you really had no fear. You were ready for whatever life confronted you with. So tell us a bit more about your early days in Hollywood and how you came to know some of the most famous people in Hollywood, and one thing led to another. Tell us about that, Joie.
Okay, so when I was at Westmore's, Rosemary Clooney, a lot of movie stars and producers' wives, it was a very movie star place, and Rosemary Clooney used to come in to get her hair done, and her hairdresser was this guy that was liked me, and he always wanted to help me. Everyone was so kind. They always wanted to help me, and I was like some orphan. But anyway, she was talking to him one day about her husband was looking for a secretary, and he said, "Oh, you should have Joie. She's brilliant." Blah blah blah. And so she asked me to come up to the house. They lived on Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills to meet Mr. Farrar, Joe, and I told them I was a little bit older than I was because I thought it would sound a bit better. And I got the job with them, and I worked out of their house. She was back and forth all the time because she was on the road a lot. She did these shows on the road. She wasn't as her era had kind of passed a little bit, so she wasn't as huge a star as she was. But she had 5 children, all under the age of 5. So there was a huge row of kids at the house, and her mother lived there. And I mainly worked with him. When she was in town, I helped her. But he was wonderful. It was such an experience working for him, because he was just an intelligent, brilliant man. But then he went off to New York to do a play after about 6 months. And I didn't want to be stuck in this big house all on my own. No one really to talk to. So I then went to an agency. I heard about this great agency in Beverly Hills. But now that I've had local experience, and for someone whose name I could use, I was able to sign on with this agency in Beverly Hills. And they handled all the studios and all the top people in the entertainment world, these people. I didn't know that when I went there. I just thought it looked like a nice agency. Everything was, I was only 18. I didn't think these things out. Like, I didn't sit down and have like an idea of what I was doing. It all just kind of flowed. And I went there, and they sent me on these 2 marvelous interviews, and I didn't know which one to pick out of the 2 guys, 2 producers they sent me on. And I eventually chose the one that was nearest the bus stop, because I thought that was the most practical way of picking the job. And it was for Harold Mirisch, and he was at Samuel Goldwyn Studios on Formosa Avenue at that time. And it was the best decision. It was one of the best jobs I've ever had. It was the most extraordinary place to work. Yeah.
Why was it so extraordinary? Why was that, Joie? Tell us why.
Because he was an independent producer, and he used to put directors under contract. So there were all these marvelous directors all having offices there. So that's where I met Billy Wilder was there, Robert Wise, John Sturges, James Clavell, who else? Norman Jewison, who was a young director at that time, and Blake Edwards. It was filled with all these wonderful creative people, and it was such a small company that everybody knew each other, and it was like a little family. So you got to know all these people quite well, and it was a small studio. And for some reason, I clicked with Billy Wilder. We got on really well. I think he kind of likes English people, and so I used to go and watch him shoot, and listen to him talking about his work and his life, and then it all kind of. I think it was because I was so curious and not wanting anything from anybody. I was just a bit of a free spirit. I wasn't asking anybody to do anything for me. I just was interested to meet them, and I think they found that probably a bit refreshing.
Yeah, so they almost kind of adopted you in a way. Plus the fact, as you said, you found a place where the nearest bus stop was, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful story. And so you started meeting a tremendous bunch of people you've just described. And somewhere along the way, Joie, I think a couple of producers named Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson came into the picture. Can you tell us about that? Yeah. And where did that lead to?
Well, that was this was it's a big jump, because after I was working at the Mirisch Company, I went back to England in 1964, and I was working on some Mirisch films in England for Daley Thompson. That's when I was working for Lee. And so in 1966, I came back to America again. I missed working here and being here, and I came back. And when I came back in 1966, I was working at Columbia Pictures. I'm going to interrupt you a little bit.
So you tell me the chronology. I want to get the chronology right, because before we talk about rock and roll, Joie, I'd like you to tell the listeners about you working on a film in the south of France, because you were kind of yo-yoing back and forth there, and you were working on a film, an intriguing film in the south of France, where you met some very interesting people. So sorry to take you off course, but can you tell us about that?
Yes, so I went back to England in 1964, and by chance, I don't know, I'm very lucky I got to work with Lee Thompson, and he was making a film at that time at MGM called Return from the Ashes. And that was with Maximilian Schell and Ingrid Tulin, who worked for Bergman. She was one of Bergman's actresses, and Samantha Eggar and Herbert Long. And then after that film, Lee got an offer by Martin Ranzerhoff to do Eye of the Devil. And we went to, it wasn't the south of France, we were actually in the central and west of France. We were in the wine country. This film was in the wine country. But when we went, the first location was in a very rural area in the middle of France. And we were staying, the crew was staying in town, but I was staying with Lee and the cameraman and Sharon Tate and David Niven at this very tiny chateau. It only had 5 rooms, and we were put there because it was nice and quiet for Lee at the end of the day, and the actors too. And at that time, when we shot the film initially, Kim Novak was in it, and Kim Novak and was very jealous of Sharon, so they tried to keep them in separate. You know, they didn't have any scenes together. I don't think it's initially. But anyway, in the middle of the film, Kim Novak fell off a horse and hurt her back, so they had to rewrite the film and recast it. And the second time we shot it was with Deborah Carr in the lead. But we were sent back that same. So I got to know Sharon the first time we made the film, and then when we were back the second time, we were still in the same little hotel. So we were the same age, and we had dinner together. And this was her first big film, really. She did some television. She was under contract to Martin Ranzerhoff, the producer, and he was her manager as well. So she was being guided by him what her career should be, and she was in this film, and she was just charming and a delight. She was just such a lovely human being. She was so kind and was curious, and so it was a lovely location. Then we went to Burgundy and shot a chateau there. She wasn't in a lot of scenes. She had a kind of a co-star. Wasn't a co-star. She was just had a small part with David Hemmings. They were the 2 younger people in the film. And so I was about their age. So we kind of all hung out together, the younger lot. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, please.
Not too many people. These are the adventures of Joey the Innocent abroad. So tell us a bit more. Sharon Tate was pretty unknown, wasn't she? And
yes.
You became bosom buddies. And tell us what she was like, a little bit more detail of what she was like way back then when nobody knew who she was.
Well, she wasn't like a really ambitious actress. You know, she wasn't like one of those burning with ambition type of girl. She was a really nice person. She was really beautiful. She was almost ethereal. She was so beautiful. And I think she just wanted to just be accepted as an ordinary person, not everyone just going on about how beautiful she was all the time. And so she could really relax around me and just talk like 2 girls would talk. I don't know what we talked about, I can't remember now, but we kind of chatted about clothes and music and whatever. And she was engaged at that time to Jay Sebring, and he was very involved in all the aspects of her life. He would go to the publicity department and look at the photographs and decide which ones should be published and which ones wouldn't. He was trying to manage her life. She had Martin Ranzerhoff trying to manage her life. She had all these men around her managing her life. And so when she was with me, she could just be herself and not, have to be around these manipulating men. And when we got back to London, I went on some publicity things with her. She had some publicity stuff to do, and I went with her. And then one day, Ranzerhoff said she had to go to this audition with Polanski. and she was terrified about going for that because, you know, he was such a huge director. And she didn't think that she had that kind of talent to be working with someone like that. So I remember going with her to the audition to meet him. It wasn't an audition, it was just a meeting. And he didn't want her in the film. And she wasn't at all like the character he had envisioned. He wanted like an ethnic-looking woman, not this California blonde thing. And he told Ransohoff he didn't want her in the film. And she got really upset. And Ransohoff said, well, he wouldn't put up the money if he didn't put her in the film. And it was one of those things. So, but then obviously it didn't take very long before they actually fell in love with each other.
So this was at the start of the romance between Roman Polanski, the Polish-born, the Polish film director, the famous director, and Sharon Tate. You had mentioned a moment ago that Jay Sebring, who was a famous, to those who don't know, was a famous Hollywood hairdresser, was on the scene and was definitely, from your observation, a hot item with Sharon at the time. And I think the movie was a vampire movie, wasn't it?
Sorry, it was a what?
No, so I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead too far. At the time that you knew Sharon, she was definitely, she was going out with Jay Sebring, and then it wasn't until later on that Martin Ransohoff, the film producer, made the movie about vampires in which Sharon met Roman Polanski. So I just to clarify that, that was the sort of order of the way things went. Is that correct?
Yes, it was The Vampire Killers, the film that she made with him. But she was engaged. She was engaged to Jay Sebring during that time. Before she met Polanski, she was engaged to Jay Sebring. Again,
I don't want to sort of run out of order, but we mentioned Sharon Tate and we mentioned Jay Sebring, and as the world knows, tragically, in 1969 they were both murdered. I wondered if I could ask you how you heard about that. You knew them, you knew the principals, you knew what was going on in their personal lives. Do you remember where you were and what your reaction was when you heard that Sebring and Sharon, who was pregnant, had been murdered?
Yes, I do remember. I was on my way to Heathrow Airport. I was going to Scotland for the weekend, and I heard it on the radio. It was quite early in the morning here. There in England, and then I bought a newspaper at the airport, and remember reading it on the plane up there, and I just was in total disbelief. I was so devastated for her. Her life was so everything she wanted at that point. She'd always wanted to have a baby. That was so much more important to her than being a famous actress. And I hadn't seen her for a number of years because our lives. I was moving around and she was moving around, so I didn't actually see her since 1967. I think was the last time I saw her. And it just devastated me that first of all, the fact that she was murdered as a pregnant woman, but the whole episode of the Manson killings and the whole, the drama and the darkness and the macabreness of it all was just so devastating. And I just kept closing my eyes and just imagining her face. It was just so devastating to think you knew someone that this had happened to, like one of the worst crimes of the century, or certainly in my life.
Joie, I'm sorry to jump around in your life, but can we go back a few years? Because there's a key episode in your life that led to much more joyous things. And it was your involvement working, I believe, for Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneiderman, who were well-known producers, I think, at Columbia Studios. And as a result of that, you met you met some entertainers. Can you tell us a little bit about that remarkable story, please?
Well, I wasn't working for them. I didn't even know who they were. I was at Columbia Pictures working. I was working for a film director. I was working in the movie division of Columbia. So it was Columbia Pictures. They were working at Screen Gems, which was at the television division of Columbia. And one day I was in the commissary having lunch, and they came up to me and asked me if I was English. They could hear me speaking. And I said yes, and asked me how long. I just came back from London. I just moved back to LA from London. This was 1966. And they said, oh, would you mind coming with them one day to watch a pilot that they had made? They'd like to get my opinion on it. And I said, oh, you wouldn't want my opinion. I don't know anything about television, and I don't know much about music. I just like music, but I don't know much about the music business. So they said, oh, no, who do you like? And of course, at that time, the band I liked was the Beatles. They said, oh, you'd love this thing then, because our thing is similar to the Beatles, and, you must come and watch it. So we made an appointment, and I went to a screening room with them, and we sat and watched this pilot that they did about these four boys. And it was kind of like quick cuts, like Hard Day's Night. They were leaping around and doing lots of silly antics and things. It was actually quite silly. And, I was now like 23. I mean, I wouldn't be watching something like that. But anyway, they thought that my opinion mattered. So I said, well, it's nothing that I would particularly watch, but I'm sure that young teenagers would probably adore it, and it would probably be a huge success. And I said, but I've never heard of the group. Where do they perform? And then they started telling me about how they got the group together and how they auditioned all these boys, and some were musicians, and some were actors. And they kind of picked one here and picked one there, and then they formed the four of them. And after I left, I was quite intrigued how they did that. I thought that would make like a great story just in itself, not the actual Monkees, but how they put the Monkees together. And so I wrote the story about what they told me, how they did the auditions and stuff like that. And you, Ivor, I knew you then, Ivor, and I thought I could give you the story because you were a journalist. I thought it would be something you might be interested in. I don't know if you remember this, but you told me that your newspaper wouldn't be writing stuff like that. You were much more lofty than that. And you told me that I should write it, and you gave me the names of some publishers to send it to in London. So I wrote the story and sent it off, and I got rejection letters from everyone because they didn't know who the Monkees were, they didn't know who I was. So they said, no, we're not interested at all. It doesn't make any sense to us. Who cares? And then about a month later, their show became a huge hit in America. And so all these people wrote back to me and asked me for more stories about the Monkees. And so I went over to Bert and Bob. I got friendly with them by now, and I asked them if I could write some stories, and they said yes. And I started writing for a magazine called Fabulous 208, which was named after a radio station in London. And Fabulous was the name. Everything was fabulous in those days. So they used the word fabulous because it was like the in word. And 208 was the number on the dial. And so I started writing stories about them, and they bought all my stories. I was like their correspondent in LA. And I got friendly with the boys when they were like, at the beginning. And so they kind of trusted me. So I just, wrote a column. And then after a while, they wanted to ghostwrite. So I used to write a column for one of them each week. So I would hang out with whoever I was writing about that week. I would hang out about what they did all week, and then I'd write the column as if they were writing it to their fans. And so I was around them a lot, with Bert, and I was much friendly with Bert than Bob Brazelton.
So you were on the ground floor when the Monkees were unleashed on the world, and I wondered, as a young journalist who was writing about them, can you tell us how you felt about them, and can you tell us whether you thought they were going to be a big hit, and tell us a little bit about the boys?
Well, I have to confess, I didn't think they were going to be a big hit. I didn't think they were that talented. I didn't think the television show was that great. I just thought they were, disposable entertainment. You could watch it and then forget about it. And so I didn't think that they would last very long. But I was writing for a magazine, and the kids loved it. I used to get all these fan letters from all these kids at school in London, how much they liked these guys. So I knew there was an audience of people out there that liked them. I mean, I was a bit older, and my taste was quite different. Then I was more into movies and theatre and stuff. So, but I liked the boys. I got on really well with them. I especially became good friends with Mike Nesmith and Peter Tork. I could actually talk to them. We hung out more socially. I liked being with them. Mickey and funny enough, Mickey and Davey, who were the actors, were much more consumed with themselves, and so therefore, when you're with them, it was a bit of an ego trip for them. But with Mike and Peter, they were just really super, super kind, super nice. I have a lovely story about Peter Tork. When I was doing one week, it was Peter's column, and I told him I had to hang out with him a bit more this week because I was doing his column. And he said, "Oh, come up and have lunch at my apartment." So I went up to have lunch, and he had at that time they were quite prosperous. He had a chef there whose actual name was Joey as well. And there was a guy on the sofa, and he said, "Oh, you have to meet my friend. He just got here from New York. I think he was from New York, and he wants to be a musician." And I said, "Oh, I'll write about you. You might be famous one day." And I said, I put them in my column, and it was Stephen Sills, who went on to be very famous.
Yes, yes.
Well, so that was they were very cute. No, I was just going to say they were all very cute. They were very cute guys.
Okay. I know that my cohorts at the other end of want to ask you some questions, but before I'm going to say unleash them on you. I don't mean that really. I want to ask you, with such a diverse career. So here is this young Joey in Wonderland, and the next time I saw you, you were hanging out with a guy, one of the most famous film directors in the world, Sam Peckinpah. Sam Peckinpah directed Straw Dogs, the Major Dundee, Cat Garrett and Billy the Kid, which of course had that singer who did quite well. What's his name? Bob, I forget his last name. Anyway, so the question is...
Bob Dylan,
yes, of course, yeah. I always forget that guy. I think he did quite well.
And he also did The Wild Bunch.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I didn't know he was in that one. Good. Well, thank you.
No. Sam directed The Wild Bunch. I'm talking about Sam.
Yeah. Oh, Sam directed The Wild Bunch. Now, I'll just leave you to talk this. Sam directed The Wild Bunch, and everything I knew, even when I went to film The Getaway, Sam was a bit of a wild man. So all of a sudden, this sweet young thing from the UK, namely you, married him. So tell us about that.
Well, when I first met Sam, I'd heard that he was this wild, crazy guy, and I met him in London in the early 70s in London, and he was a friend of the guy I was working for. I was working for Ken Hyman, and Ken Hyman used to run Warner Brothers in LA in the 60s, and he produced The Wild Bunch, and so and another film that Sam did, and he produced lots of films in the 60s when he was running Warner Brothers, and so Sam was a friend of his. So and also when I worked for Richard, because Richard was in Major Dundee. I haven't spoken about Richard yet, so I shouldn't even talk about that. Anyway, so this one day, Sam came up to see Kenny in the office, and I had no idea what Sam Peckinpah looked like. I just heard about this wild guy, over the years from the industry, and that he had made the Wild Bunch and stuff. And this really nice, sweet-looking man came into the office one morning and asked for Ken. And Ken wasn't there. And I said, I'm sure he'll be here soon if you want to wait. And he sat down, and he was very polite and very quiet. And it was about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. And I asked him if he'd like some coffee, and he said he would. And but I didn't believe he was Sam Peckinpah. I thought it was a guy playing a trick on me, because Ken's friends were always like playing tricks on me. They always thought it was quite amusing to make me feel silly. So they would always set me up and then laugh and say, oh, we're just joking. So I thought this guy was not even Sam Peckinpah. He was just saying he was Sam Peckinpah. So when I offered him the coffee and I asked him if he'd like the milk, and I asked him what he took in his coffee, and he said, I'd like some cognac. And I said, oh, my God. It was like 9:30 in the morning. I said, well, you must be Sam Peckinpah. Your reputation precedes you. But he wasn't, when I first started knowing him, he wasn't wild and he wasn't drunk. He was writing a script, and Ken had given him an office space in our suite of offices where we had in Piccadilly. And he often started inviting me out for lunch with him, and I started going out for lunch with him. And he was very nice, very polite. And so I thought everybody must be wrong. I didn't see that side of him yet.
And then you got married.
And then we got married. Yes, he proposed to me. We got engaged in London. I went back to America with him. He was very old-fashioned. He was a contradictory kind of a person. You know, he was quite old-fashioned, really. Got engaged, and we went back to America. And but I think as he was getting more and more successful, I think it got more and more difficult for him to keep up this reputation of being this wild guy, and he was, you know, very insecure about himself and about his work, and he was angry. I guess he was one of angry artists, and started drinking it much heavier. And yeah, it got to a point, that was quite difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are running a bit down, and I want to give Bob and Warren and Phil a chance to weigh in. So if I'm going to sort of step back and ask the three gentlemen if there's anything they would like to add to continue this conversation until we're out of time.
Well, these guys might be thinking of something, but what I'd like to ask two things. The first is, do you have anything else to say about that Bob Dylan character that you guys mentioned before?
Do you?
Well, I don't. I don't. I mean, I don't. I think his name was Zimmerman. It wasn't Dylan. I think it was Zimmerman. I think he faked his name as Dylan and changed it. But anyway, no, that's all I can add to that. And I think, as I say, I think this guy Dylan did quite well in showbiz. But that's all I know about him.
In Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, I think his name was Elias, which he must have loved, having an alias. But any anecdotes from the movie?
I think he named his Dylan after Dylan Thomas, the poet.
Well, absolutely. But in the film, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, his name was Elias, or an alias, which is perfect for Dylan. Were there any anecdotes from that movie or anything from that time?
He was very, very quiet. He barely spoke, actually. He kind of kept himself to himself. But the one wonderful experience I had, I went to the recording of Knocking on Heaven's Door that he wrote for the film, and I went with Sam to the recording session of that, and that was really very exciting because he was actually performing and he was kind of in his element. I don't think he was quite in his element when he was as an actor, and was quiet and didn't really speak very much to anyone. I got to know his wife and kids, but not him very well. But I got to know him when he was recording. He was quite different and quite friendly.
Where was that recording session? Was that back in Los Angeles area, or?
Yeah, it was in Los Angeles. I think it may have been at Warner Brothers. I'm not quite sure where we were actually. I think it was a recording studio. I can't remember where we were. I can't remember. But yeah, it was a recording studio, and he was doing the song for the film.
Well, not many people have been at a Dylan recording session. That's pretty amazing. Do you have a book that's coming out soon? Are you working on a book?
I don't know if it's coming out soon. I've been working on a book for a while. I don't know when and if it's coming out, Bob. I'm sort of plowing through it at the moment. I don't know how interesting it'll be.
Well, I'm sure it'll be very interesting based on this show. Warren, do you have anything to ask Ivor and our guest here?
No, I'm good. It was nice to meet you, Joey.
Warren.
Your stories are very interesting, and my interest was more with the Sharon Tate stuff. I have no questions at the moment, but I'd like to have you back and ask about that if at all possible.
I'd love to. Yes, of course.
Well, maybe we
but
can
first
get
of
out.
all, Joey, you've got to write your book.
Yeah, there you go.
Ivor's been encouraging me to do that for several years.
We can advertise your book if and when you get it out.
Oh, thank you, Bob. That's so sweet. Thank you.
That's Warren. This is
that's
Warren.
all right.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I got to get used to your voices and names to put together. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
It's all good.
That's all good. And Ivor, you sound good, and I hope everything is fine with you. Your voice is coming along real good.
Thank you. This is Ivor Davis, the author of The Beatles and Me on Tour, and my most recent book, Manson Exposed, the reporter's 50-year journey into madness and murder. And it's been an absolute delight talking to Joey. She has some other great stories. We didn't cover a great deal of stuff, but she has some wonderful stories involving people like Richard Harris, the lad from Limerick, but that's for another time and another place and for her book.
That's
Thank
great.
you, Ivor.
There you go. And Phil, would you like to say a few words?
Tell us about your upcoming book, Phil. What do you got coming out soon?
I will, Bob. Thank you. Joey, I wanted to ask you one quick question. I believe I have some of the old fabulous magazines. How long did you write for them, and did you write about any other artists or bands other than the Monkees?
I did. I can't remember all of them. I wrote. I think I was with them from when did I start? The end of 1966 to about a year and a half. I think I worked with them, and then I went back to London. I was going to work for them in London, but I met Richard Harris, and then I changed course. I started working for him, but I was going back to London to work for Fabulous in London. But they used to send. I have a wonderful monkey story where I went up to the Monterey Pop Festival, but I'll tell you that another time.
Tell us now.
It's just kind of a sweet story. I was at a recording session with the Monkees, and it was, they didn't allow journalists usually in there because they had a lot of contract musicians there that played, and they wanted everyone to think that the Monkees played everything, So they didn't allow journalists in there, but they let me in because they knew I wasn't going to say anything. And I was going off to the Monterey Pop Festival to cover it for those 3 days for my magazine, and I was having such a good time at this session that I completely forgot what time it was, and I missed my flight to Monterey. There was only like one flight, and so the Peter said, "Oh, Mickey and I are going up there, and we've hired a jet private plane. You can come up with us." So I said, "Oh, fabulous, even better." So I stayed there until like very late. We left like in the early hours of the morning. We drove I think we went to Santa Monica Airport, and we took off. And when we got to Monterey, the fog was so thick we couldn't land in Monterey. So the pilot went all the way up to San Jose, and we then Mickey got a taxi, and we taxied back all the way back to Monterey by road, and arrived very early in the morning the first day of the festival. And so I covered the festival and watched that. Derek Taylor was running that festival, Ivor.
Yes, I remember Derek, yes.
Yeah. So Derek was a friend that I'd met through Ivor, and he was so great, and he was so wonderful. I always had like front row seats, and I mean, he just took such great care of me. So yeah, I covered that, and so I covered all the bands that were playing and everything that was happening for those 3 days. It was wonderful. Had such fun.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and the Monkees were there. The two boys were there. Just Nicky and Peter. They went up there.
I just got a great title. Joey, I got a great title. Suddenly it came to me for your book.
What? What?
The wild men in my life, including the Monkees.
Oh, that's so funny.
Well, as long as you take it with the right sense of humor, Joey.
I do. Yes, it is hard to imagine that this innocent little thing from Muswell Hill got involved with all these crazy people. But I kind of was, I accepted people how they are. I didn't judge people.
So we thank you guys for being here tonight. That was a wonderful show. We give you a huge thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you. Lovely to meet you both.
And when the book comes out, you'll have to let us know so that we can let everybody know about it. And I'm sure it'll be a big hit. And usually we close the show with us singing the end.
Okay.
And in the end,
the love
you take
is equal to
the love you make.
bow, 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 bow. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Oh,
So
God. Okay.
Ready? And in the end,
the love you take. Miss Joey, you've got to get
you can do it again. You can do it again.
I've forgotten the tune.
Or do you have some pictures you could send over as well?
Well, I've got pictures of me in kindergarten. Is that what you're looking for?
That's what I was hoping for. I don't have any of those yet among my collection.
I know a few ladies that would like to
I
sing.
will look.
That sounds like a deal.
We want to hear you sing, Joey.
Sing? No, you won't. Your show be scrapped if I sing.
No.
I have such a terrible voice.
You and I.
Could you explain to Joey before she
The Beatles have the short song, The End, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. That's the whole song. So usually I sing and in the end, and you and Ivor would sing the love you take, and then Phil says is equal to, and Warren says the love you make, and that usually ends our show. And none of it is great singing, it's just for fun. But would you want to give it a shot? So I would sing the love you take, and in the end. Actually, I messed it up. I usually sing in the end, and you two would sing the love you take, and Phil would sing it's equal to, and Warren the love you make. We could rehearse. What do you say?
So hang on. So what do I have to say? The love you take. I have to sing.
That's it.
With Ivor. So I'll sing and in the end, and then you two say the love you take. Phil says is equal to, and Warren closes us out with the love you make. So we could try it. Okay. We could rehearse it and see what happens.
Yeah.
So I say, and in the end.
All you and I have to sing is the love you take. See, I mean, I've been practicing for the last 2 hours.
There you go.
We just sing, you and I, Joey, the love you take. So,
okay. How do I know when you're ready?
As soon as Bob finishes his singing.
So I just say, and in the end, and then you and Ivor will sing the love you take. So I'll say, and in the end, and then you two go, the love you take. And then
The love you take.
There you go. That was beautiful.
Very good. Okay, I'm ready when you're ready.
All right.
Okay.
We'll give it a shot, and if we mess it up, we'll do it again, okay?
Okay, that's good.
All right.
Very good, Joey.
That was fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. I'm sorry I was out of tune, but thank you.
It was fun.
This is going to be on our bloops and blunders at the end of the year.
Oh, lovely. I like that. I like the on the bloops and blunders.
There you go.
Very good. That was fun.
That was great fun.
That was
Thank
good,
you, guys.
Joey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you,
Joe. How are
Joey.
you?
Everyone. Have a good evening,
Night.
everyone.
Thank
Be
you.
safe.
Bye.
Bye. Be safe.
Bye-bye,
Thanks,
Bob.
guys.
Bye-bye, Warren.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
I'll talk to you later.